I'm Eugene Grigo, and this is an FTF News Live interview. These are in-depth interviews featuring movers and shakers in the securities operation industry. Today, we're speaking with Ian Duke Reshadeh, Compliance Strategy Principal at Hearsay Systems. Hearsay is a solutions provider that, among other things, helps firms with social media compliance. Recently, Hearsay Systems announced that it has expanded its video support for Facebook and LinkedIn across the Hearsay Systems platform. This is in response to financial services firms that are increasing their usage of social media to make more meaningful connections to clients during the pandemic lockdown. But Ian, before we dive into the questions, could you tell us a little bit about Hearsay Systems, a little bit about the platform, and what your role is now at Hearsay?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Eugene and FTF for having me today. Hearsay Systems was launched in 2009 and now works with about 200,000 advisors and agents across the financial services industry, providing a compliant engagement platform that allows them to interact with clients and prospects on social media, texting, and advisor websites. And at Hearsay, I'm the Vice President and Head of Compliance Strategy for the company, which makes me responsible for a number of things, basically everything compliance related, but specifically, supporting how our customers use the Hearsay product, as well as engaging with our product teams to influence the features and functionality that we're developing, like the one we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, there seems to be an uptick in demand for social media compliance solutions. But what is reigniting the interest in social media compliance?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think there are two things that, in our view, have reignited social media compliance. Firstly, the pandemic. Through three metrics I just want to quickly reflect on. We've seen about a 24% uptick in social media use by advisors in this year alone. And actually, our platform's already processed 4 million social activities. In 2020, last year, 53% of our customers across the world posted over 247,000 videos through the platform. And lastly, 9 out of 10 advisors have said that social change the nature of their client relationships during the pandemic. Secondly, this uptick in activity has drawn the attention of many of the regulatory bodies that govern financial services. Video does add a layer of complexity to the opportunity to engage, and the SEC and FINRA have all put out notices during the last 6 months or so, reminding financial services organizations and advisors of the obligations related to the use of this medium. What I expect that means is that the regulators are going to look at the policies and procedures, controls, and testing that firms have in place for their advisors to use this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So within many firms, the chief marketing officer and his or her team are driving the social media strategies. Mm-hmm. And I assume that the marketing team works closely with the compliance team. But what other internal groups would need to be more aware of social media compliance?
It's the way that organizations have been thinking about social media has continued to evolve, and I believe, to your point, the CMO and the marketing teams have been driving the platform level types of content, and so as the features and the use of social media has expanded into other parts of the organization, we see more of the middle and back office getting involved in terms of the testing of use of social media, specifically video and other newer functionality, as well as information security and technology, working closer to validate that the solutions are effectively providing the advisors and the organization with the strategies that they're trying to use and pursue. So it's become a bit more of a team sport in relation to how organizations are working through the topic.
And what kinds of video content are we talking about? What are firms posting?
Yeah, what's interesting is, sort of as a bit of a reminder, depending on how an organization is licensed, whether they're a broker-dealer, a dual registrant, or other, as well as the type of content that's being shared, the videos may be required to be pre-approved. And so the other piece to remember is sort of regulators tend to be agnostic to the channel that is being used and are focused on that content. And so in terms of the types of videos that we're seeing advisors use the most frequently, it tends to be around, broad-based financial education. What does a 401k do for one? What's a 529 plan? They might be engaging with content about their local community, speaking about some philanthropic activity that they may be participating in, or highlighting something that's happened locally. And lastly, the videos tend to be about macroeconomic observations, specifically those that don't reference a specific product or service of the organization, because those will trigger much broader and more complex compliance obligations.
And is there a bit of a learning curve for producing and then distributing the video content?
It's a lot like historically, what kind of headshot did you have on your profile? There is a bit of a learning curve in terms of understanding that the quality of the video is sometimes as important as the content. So being able to be familiar with certain maybe light video editing tools could dramatically increase the quality of the video and its relatability. The solution that we provide is intended to be fairly straightforward and intuitive, but I think technology as a whole has continued to evolve. So those that have been using technology for some time are able to make the transition to using new things like video and other functionality more seamlessly than those that perhaps are, reacting a little bit more to this increase and understanding that, being able to use social media more fully today requires them to have that understanding.
And what are some of the common compliance problems that firms have when they're getting their videos ready?
Yeah, it's interesting because typically organizations will have policies and procedures in place that guide advisors as to what channels they can use and how they can use them. And so with video, the pitfall, or even with new technologies, the pitfall will be that maybe the policy hasn't been updated, which would require some focus. But it also might be that organizationally they're not ready to use video, and so an advisor not being familiar with their internal policies and procedures could get them in trouble pretty quickly. Secondly, as I mentioned, video is typically treated as just another channel by the regulatory bodies, and so if it's not reviewed, and in some cases prior to being used, or it's not retained, both the advisor and that organization could face regulatory scrutiny. I think the other piece is, in an effort to kind of replace some of the in-person activity, in-person meetings that advisors might have been having with their customers, they might use, pre-prepared written material, some sort of presentation during their video use, and without the appropriate controls, that too can end up in a bit of a similar outcome.
Then quickly, could you maybe drill down a bit on some of the capabilities that you're now offering? That I think the announcement was earlier this month, but if you could just maybe give us some idea of what is new for the platform, the Hearsay platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Hearsay platform is designed to offer the opportunity for advisors to use channels, a number of different channels, including those that are specifically where a customer may want to engage. And so what the new functionality does is fairly straightforward insofar as it allows an advisor to create their own video content and upload it to the Hearsay platform so that it can go through the supervisory controls that are otherwise required, and therefore it gets subjected to the compliance workflow and supervisory workflow, so that the regulatory guidelines that have been implemented by the firm's program are in place, and so the risks are mitigated. So in short, being able to decide whether to upload a video or to engage in a different channel is now seamless for the advisor.
Mhm. And as you had mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of a lockdown, or semi-lockdown, or people are actually working from home, and it's been sort of a captive audience in a way.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that we get past the pandemic and get into the new chapter or the new normal. Do you foresee any kind of long-term changes in social media compliance coming from this crazy period?
I think the uptick that we've seen is not going to resort back to the levels of pre-pandemic. Not simply because folks are no longer under a lockdown. Our expectation is that the use of social media is going to continue to be pretty high. Customers like to be able to engage in different channels, so they may appreciate a direct message through one of the platforms, or seeing a video, and advisors are going to continue to take advantage of that. As today the pandemic sort of has forced folks to be a little bit more regionally conscious. I think as we move out of a pandemic environment, there's a likelihood that will continue, but it will broaden out, and especially with some of the other regulatory changes that have come down the pike. I think the opportunity to build credibility and establish one's network more expansively in a compliant manner will be something that we continue to see. I think in alignment with that, the regulatory authorities are continuing to look at, what controls do organizations have in place to manage the pandemic, and some of those foundational rules are going to continue to evolve, which means we probably will continue to see social media be at the front. It's sort of how people are engaging, more use of the mobile phone, of the mobile device, less engagement in in-person activity.
Oh, great. And I'm really glad we got a chance to speak today about this interesting change in social media compliance. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and I guess have a happy Friday. Thank you everyone. And thank you, Ian.